Hi, hello, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. So, here is another episode of Extraordinary Stories podcast, Short Stories. So, I'm going to tell you 3 short stories in this episode, and they fall under the banner of medicine. So, it's medically themed because one of the stories that I had looked at in this episode, I'd thought about doing as a full-length episode, as one of the bigger stories. And then when I looked at it, I realised, actually, no, I think I'll do this as one of the smaller, and I'll find a few that fit around that theme. Some other interesting and extraordinary stories for you. So, altogether, there are 3 stories in this episode. I hope you will enjoy them. Okay, let's go. Okay, story 1. Holly Harvey Crippen was 48 years old when he was hanged in London's Pentonville prison at 9 a.m. on November 23rd, 1910. Crippen had actually planned to commit suicide only hours before his hanging. He had planned to do this with the broken glass from his spectacles, but this had been interrupted. He was smiling as the cap was put over his head, and he was led to the gallows. Why was he smiling? I have no idea. Why? Why was he smiling? So John Ellis, who was the hangman, recalled that Crippen, he came across as the most pleasant of fellows. He was a lovely man. So when his body dropped, it broke all of the bones in his neck, and he died instantly. His body was buried in the prison graveyard. So, who was Holly Harvey Crippen? Well, I'm just about to tell you. He was an American man who was trained as a homeopathic doctor. He was a small man, 5'3" or 5'4" tall in inches, which actually kind of the same height I am. So he was about 5'3", 5'4". He was, this description I've got of him is, he was bespectacled and mustachioed. Now, I like that. I like that someone's mustachioed. Just means got a tash. He was described as quiet, mild, and polite. He was docile and an utterly unremarkable person. That is a rubbish way to ever be described, isn't it? That's a terrible, terrible way to be described. I would be furious if I thought somebody described me as quite unremarkable. Anyway, so the story of Dr. Crippen goes like this. Dr. Crippen was a homeopathic doctor, as I'd already said, and Dr. Crippen had a wife who was described as blousy, heavy drinking, vain, promiscuous, and a bit of a nightmare. Now, okay, I know what all of those means. I'm not sure about blousy. I get, man, no, actually, maybe. Hang on a minute. I think I do know what blousy means. I think it's one of those like figurative ones, isn't it? Where you sort of get a picture in your head when you hear blousy. So that was his wife. She came from a Polish family in New York, and she was called Cora. Cora was a singer. She was an entertainer. She used to play lots of clubs, do lots of singing. She did a whole host of entertaining jobs during the time. I think she sang opera as well for a while. I think that if you look for it, I didn't look for it, but I think you can find some recordings of her opera. She operated under the stage name Belle Elmore. So, Dr. Crippen and his wife Cora, they moved from America to London in 1897, and the doctor worked at a centre which treated the deaf. When he arrived here, he couldn't take a job as a doctor. I don't know what that was. There was something between he had all the qualifications to be a doctor in America, but when he got to the UK, somehow he couldn't practice as a doctor, and so he took this management position at a centre for the deaf. During his time working there, he became attracted to one of the typists who worked there. Her name was Ethel. So the two of them, they fell in love. They were in love, but their relationship, it didn't reach the sex point, or it didn't reach having an affair. They just mutually agreed that they loved each other. They would see each other every day, and they would look forward to seeing each other. They loved each other's company, but it never went any further than just understanding between them that they had a love for each other. And this was, of course, because Dr. Crippen was married. He was married to Cora. It couldn't go anywhere. So in 1905, the Crippens moved to a house in the Holloway area of North London. And to earn a little bit extra money, they took in some lodgers. So their house became like a place for people to come and stay, and it was a sort of bed breakfast type of thing. So on a fairly average working day, Dr. Crippen leaves work and he heads home, only to get home and discover something that absolutely sends him insane. His wife Cora was in bed with one of the guests who was currently staying with them. Now, I say sends him insane. This was not the first time that Cora had been unfaithful to her husband, and it was said, I said it earlier, he was mild-mannered, he was quiet, obviously he's mustachioed, but the doctor had turned a blind eye to all of this. But at this moment, he'd had enough. He thought, no, enough is enough. So, being in love with Ethel at his work, him and Ethel started a proper relationship, and it continued for a good number of years. So the doctor and Cora's marriage was at this point completely dissolving, and he felt an affair was acceptable because of Cora's treatment of him. She was having affairs and she wasn't being quiet about it. She was happy to let their friends and everyone else know that she was sleeping with other men. So, Dr. Crippen, he did the same thing with Ethel. He made the affair public. In their workplace, it was common knowledge that they were an item. They were described as acting like a married couple. So what happens next? On the 31st of January, Dr. Crippen and Cora throw a party in their home. It's busy, it's loud, lots of alcohol. Cora she's getting up and she's entertaining all the guests by singing, she's dancing, she's doing it all. She's performing for everyone at the party. The party ends, everyone goes home, and the following day, on February the 1st, 1910, Cora Crippen vanishes. She is nowhere to be found. So, when questioned by police and friends and family, Dr. Crippen explains her disappearance by telling people she had decided to go back to America for a few months to try and make some money, because they didn't have much money between them as a couple. So Cora had decided the best course of action was that she would go back to America, she would do some singing in some of the music halls, some of the clubs, and get some money and bring it back. This didn't really satisfy people, and the police, they continued to question this. They felt this was suspicious. Even more suspicion grew when Ethel, very shortly after Cora's disappearance, moved in to the Crippen house and they began to live together in that home. So when Cora couldn't be contacted by family, the family again went to the police and demanded that they go back to Dr. Crippen and ask more questions. When they do, Dr. Crippen tells them something they weren't really expecting. He says, "Oh, actually, she died. Cora died. She went to America, as I said that she did. And unfortunately, in that time, she's passed away." So the family try their best to validate this, to try and find any evidence that this might actually be the case. And police are very, very suspicious. They're thinking, no, hang on a minute. You told us she went to America. Now you're telling us she's died in America. Can we see any evidence of this? And of course, he can't produce any evidence of this at all. So Scotland Yard are brought in to look at the case. So what does Dr. Crippen and Ethel, what do they do in this situation? They run. Dr. Crippen dresses Ethel as a boy and they flee to Brussels. Dresses her as a boy. I just imagine her being like, I don't know, in my head she looks like Oliver from the musical. She's got like a little cap on. Maybe she was mustachioed. Maybe he'd drawn a wee moustache on her. So Dr. Crippen and Ethel, dressed like a boy, off they go. They flee. They go to Brussels. So police are trying hard to locate them, but they have no idea where they might have gone at this point. They have absolutely not a clue. Where have these two disappeared to? Police are about to make an absolutely gruesome discovery in the house in which Dr. Crippen and Cora lived. They find the remains of a body beneath the coal cellar. The body is wrapped in male pyjamas and there is no head, no limbs, no bones and no genitals. It's completely mutilated. So with what they have got, these mutilated remains, they decide to do some tests and they find large doses of poison in the blood of these remains. It's a poison that the police reason Dr. Crippen would have had no problem getting his hands on. And upon further investigation, they confirm that the doctor had actually purchased this exact poison only weeks before Cora's disappearance. So the case now turns into a major murder investigation. Now, that's obviously tricky because you've got the Dr. Crippen and you've got Ethel, who I imagine, I'd like to imagine, I think she's still probably dressed as a boy at this point. I don't know, maybe a different look. Maybe she's got a top hat on now or something, she's sort of dressed like a London gentleman or something. But no one knows where they are. They still cannot be found. So police forces in lots of other countries, they're contacted, they're alerted, they're told to be on the lookout for Dr. Crippen and his partner, and all of the ports are policed should they be on board a ship. On board a ship is exactly where they are. Having moved from Brussels, Dr. Crippen and Ethel, they sail from Antwerp and they head for Canada. He is at this point calling himself Robinson, and Ethel is posing. This is so weird. She's posing as his teenage son. Ooh, creepy. I don't like it at all. Ooh, it's weird. So they're on the ship and their behaviour begins to gain a little bit of attention from other passengers on the ship and even the captain. They were describing Dr. Crippen and Ethel, still dressed as a boy, to be acting a little bit like a couple in love. but claiming to be father and son. So suspicions were high. That must have been horrible to see. That must have been absolutely horrible. You must have been looking at that and going, what the hell is going on there? Why has she got her arm around him? Why is he... Oh, yeah. Ooh, not nice. So the captain reports this to the police, that he believes he has 2 suspicious passengers on board, and Scotland Yard are informed of this. Now, the next bit, I love this. It gets like an action movie at this point. Detectives decide that this is definitely Dr. Crippen and Ethel. So what they do is they get a faster ship than the one that they are travelling on, and they sail this ship into the port where the one that they're on is going to come into, but they get there ahead of it so that they will be waiting there when Dr. Crippen and Ethel arrive. Just got this like action movie image of like these boats like trying to like speed towards a port, and the ones with the detectives on it being like, got to get there first, got to get in there. So the main detective, he was waiting when their ship pulled in. He went aboard and he arrested at that moment Dr. Crippen and Ethel. He said afterwards that he'd never in his life felt such a sense of triumph and achievement. So the murder trial begins in the Old Bailey. Flesh from under the coal cellar where the body was is proven to be Cora's, and the clothing that the mutilated body was wrapped in is proven to belong to Dr. Crippen. This, along with the poison that we know he'd purchased, adds up to a pretty solid case. So now the man who pulls all of this evidence together, we have met him before. So if you've listened to, I didn't know this until I started looking at this story. If you've listened to, what number was it? It was number 9. When I did the Oh George, the experiment episode about the guy who drowned all of his wives in the bath. You may remember that I told you about a guy called Bernard Spilsbury, who at the time was the forefront of what we now call DNA evidence or that kind of thing. So he was involved in this case. He was the man that actually looked at the flesh that had been found under the coal and determined that it was Cora's. He was the man who looked at the wrappings that she was in and said, yep, it's definitely her. And he was the man who examined the body and said, these are the traces of poison in her. I thought that was just really interesting because I just had never, when I started this, did not know the same man was involved. So Dr. Crippen's only defence, the only thing that he could come up with was to suggest that the body had always been there, that it had always been in the house, and it wasn't Cora's body, but it had always been there from the time that they moved in. But nobody was buying that. Nobody was buying that idea. I mean, it is a bit the equivalent of, something happening and you being a bit like, I'm sorry, it was like this when I got here. Do you know what I mean? It's that. It's a bit shit. It's very weak, isn't it? It's very weak. The only one thing that Dr. Crippen did succeed in doing during his trial was he got Ethel off. Ethel was taken out of it entirely. She was acquitted entirely. Hopefully Ethel at this point would have been dressed in her normal clothes and not still dressed as a boy, because that would have been very awkward for everyone. So Ethel is cleared of all these charges. The belief being that Dr. Crippen committed the murder, killed Cora, and fled with Ethel, but that Ethel would have had no idea why they were fleeing. She would have known something was wrong, but she wouldn't have known that it was actually as serious as, I've murdered my wife and I've hidden her in the coal cellar. So Dr. Crippen was sentenced to death, and he was hung for the murder of his wife, Cora. Now, over the years, a lot of people have re-examined the story, and there's always this. Lots of people are now saying, no, he wasn't guilty. No, I think I think he was right. That body was actually there when they moved in to that property. American academics in 2007 claimed that the DNA of the dead body did not match anything in Cora Crippen's distant relatives. They cannot find a single match of DNA in any of her family. And so they say this makes the case completely ridiculous. I understand that. I get that. I think he did it. There's no way you're going to dress your girlfriend up as a boy, flee to Brussels, try and get to Canada and escape the country if you've not been the person responsible for this. So that ends the story of Dr. Crippen. Okay, and on to story 2. Dr. Love. This is a crazy one. So it's 2016 and we're in Florida. We're in St. Mary's Medical Centre. And this is a very, very busy hospital. I mean, all hospitals are busy. This one, day and night, there's no stop. Okay, there's no break in this hospital. It's really busy. So a medical professional called Malachi Love Johnson is moving around the hospital, and he's in his white coat with his name badge, which states that he's called Dr. Love. I mean, what a name for a doctor. And Dr. Love says to me, right, it's either porn, or the doctor will see you now, Dr. Love, or it's a villain in an Austin Powers or shitty Batman film, Dr. Love. It just doesn't sound right at all. And do you know what I'll tell you another thing? This is just a total offside. Every time that I've been looking at this story, because I've been looking at it for a couple of days now, do you know what I can't get out of my head is, do you remember that shit song by Gloria Estefan, that emergency, paging Dr. Beat? Remember that one? Dr. Beat or something it was called? Every time I hear Dr. Love, I just get a blast of Gloria Estefan singing Dr. Beat in my head. Anyway, he is walking around the hospital. He's got his name badge, and he has a badge which says he is the Department of Anesthesiology. He's checking charts. He's looking at patients, and he's talking to relatives who are visiting. So, nothing strange there. Just your standard hospital staff, always on the go, moving around, doctors, nurses, frantic, busy. But what makes this story extraordinary is that Malachi Love Johnson is no doctor. Oh, no. He is, in fact, an 18-year-old boy in a doctor's coat. He has no medical training whatsoever. He's been roaming the halls, the rooms, and the wards of this hospital for over a month before someone notices something's not right. Right, for a start, if you look this guy up, he's 18. I swear he looks 15. There is no way anyone is buying that this guy is a doctor. It's ludicrous. So, in the hospital, no one's quite sure what he does. No one's ever really interacted with him. So, a bold nurse comes forward, good on her, and she says, nah, I want this guy investigated because something's weird here. I don't like this guy. Something's not right. So he's reported to the police and is subsequently arrested. So he goes to court. He's given a date for when his trial will happen, and he's let out on the meantime. Does this stop him? Oh, no. He goes to then work in a rehab facility in Florida, claiming to be the very well trained Dr. Love. Now, how is that happening? How? He has got no training. I don't understand. How is another facility taking him on? Come on. So, the lie quickly falls apart in the second place, and he's forced out of the rehab facility. So at this point, it's gained a bit of media attention, and he's forced to sort of go on TV and talk about, well, who the hell he is and what the hell he's doing. And in an interview on the news, he's asked, "Do you hold any kind of medical degree?" And he says, and he's so cocky, he's so fucking cocky. He says, "Yes, I hold a PhD. But what in? I'm not comfortable in disclosing." Mate, you're 18 years old. I don't think you've got a PhD. Come on, shut up. It's total bullshit. What are you talking about? So, how in the world this next bit happens, I have not a clue. He opens his own medical centre, an actual building. How is that possible? Where are his parents? What's going on? How is this happening? But people, they start attending his medical centre. They actually start to think this is a genuine place to go. If you need help with something, go here. So police are all over this because they're watching him at this time. They're waiting for his trial to happen, but they're not able to quite stop the shit things that he's doing, like opening a medical centre. So police think, and this is quite good, they think, do you know what the best way to catch him would be? Is actually to send someone in undercover and actually let him practice medicine on them. And then at that point, they're able to prove it. They're able to say, actually, do you know what? You're practicing without a license. And that's where we can properly arrest you. Because previously, they had no proof they'd actually been practicing without a license. But if they could send someone undercover in, then yes, they would have that. And they could arrest him. So this is what they do. They send an undercover female police officer in who says that she has pains in her back, and he treats her. So immediately they burst in and they arrest him. So he gets taken into jail for a couple of days and then let out again until the trial happens for this misdemeanor. Now, into the story at this point comes the man who is his business partner. His business partner has given him $10,000 to open the medical centre. So I watched an interview with the business partner, and this is what he has to say. I believe him to be a doctor, but if we go to court and the jury thinks he's lying, that's when I'll say, okay, he's a liar. How stupid are you? How idiotic are you? It doesn't make any sense. Oh my god, it's so stupid. It's so stupid. So, Dr. Love is still awaiting trial, but he has high hopes for the future. And as he puts it, when this legal nonsense is over, he can just open another clinic. And that's the end of the crazy mess that is the Dr. Love story. Just crazy. It's just nuts, that one. I just don't understand. He's just, honestly, if you have a spare 5 seconds, go on and watch him because he's so bold. He's just, he just literally looks at anyone who's asking him a question like, how dare you assume that I am not a legitimate doctor? But the irony is that he looks, I'm not kidding, he looks about 15 years old going out to Halloween with his doctor's costume on. But he's got this total thing of like, have you got the audacity to call me not a doctor? I don't understand why you would even say that. Oh, it's mental. So, that's his story. Okay, and on to the final story, story 3. This is Kristen Gilbert. Kristen Gilbert was born in 1967 in Massachusetts. As a child, Kristen performed exceptionally well at school. You know, she was one of these people, good marks, top of every class, popular. You know, we know that type, don't we? As she entered her sort of mid to upper teens, so I guess 16, 17, 18, friends and family, they start to notice something a bit weird about Kristen. They think she's becoming a bit of a habitual liar. She just tells lots of little lies on a daily basis, which they know to be not true. And this escalates up into her faking loads of suicide attempts and to gain attention. She also was displaying at about 17, 18 some really neurotic behaviour. Now her family tried to get her into therapy, but she saw 3 therapists and none of them were ever able to really pin down the problem. It must be pretty grim if you're a parent and you're sending your child and you've sent them to 3 psychologists and none of them are able to really pin down the problem. So she graduates from high school at 16 and she goes to Grenfield Community College and she receives a licence as a registered nurse in 1988. Later that year, she meets and she marries Glenn Gilbert. So, a year after she graduated, she goes on the staff of the VAMC in Northampton. Now, she made an impression straight away in the hospital really early on. Like, she was good at her job. People liked her. She was very popular with staff and she was very popular with patients in the hospital. So a few years pass. She's done a few interviews in this time. Like, she's sort of regarded as she's a great nurse. She's like, everyone respects her. Patients really like her. So when these like hospital magazines come out, she's kind of like on the cover being like, this is what nursing's really like. You know, she's doing well. But a few of the nurses who work with her, they begin to become a little bit uneasy about some of the things that are happening when Kristen is working. They begin to notice high numbers of deaths every time it's her shift. So a major red flag goes off for them. Patients, they say, who were actually quite steady, who were on the road to recovery, were all of a sudden, when she was involved, not making it. They were all of a sudden in danger. Now they passed it off and they jokingly called her, behind her back obviously, they wouldn't call this to her face, they called her the Angel of Death. Now I'm sure they thought that was pretty funny. Not really going to turn out that funny, unfortunately. In 1996, so she's been nursing in this place for a while, 3 nurses come together and they report their concern about the amount of cardiac arrest deaths and the decrease in the stocks of adrenaline in the hospital. So an investigation into Kristen is launched internally within the hospital. So the day arrives for the internal investigation and this is nuts. This is crazy. She calls the hospital ahead of going in to her meeting to be investigated, and using a fake voice, she says that there's a bomb in the hospital and that the whole hospital will need to be evacuated. So police obviously arrive, check the hospital, no bomb, they can't find anything. And so really thinking, well, this is a hoax, obviously someone's just, playing us for a fool here, they decide to go ahead with her meeting. I mean, that's a desperate attempt, isn't it? That's a really, you're so scared, you're so desperate at that point, you're just willing to do anything to avoid that meeting. So they have the investigation. They look at the levels of adrenaline that were going missing from the stock. They look at the number of heart attacks that happened while Kristen was looking after patients, and they discover that what was happening was she was injecting patients while they were asleep with adrenaline. She was causing their heart to race completely out of control, which led to them having a heart attack. That's nuts, isn't it? That's crazy. So, she's arrested, she's tried, and of course, she's convicted. She is sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 20 years. Kristen has no defence in this case. That's what's interesting. When I was looking at it, I was like, what was her defence? What did she have to say for herself? And actually, nothing. She said nothing for herself. She was given an opportunity to address the judge, address the jury, and she declined these opportunities because she just had nothing to come back with. She had nothing to say. She wept softly in court when the jury's decision to send her to prison for life was read. Her father and her grandmother, they pleaded with jurors before they arrived at their verdict to let her live, saying a death sentence. Her father and her grandmother, they pleaded with jurors before they deliberated to be lenient on her, saying that a death sentence would be so devastating for her and the two young sons that she'd had. So why, Kristen? Was Kristen mentally ill? This is something I tried to investigate. Couldn't find any evidence of that. Was there a force working inside of her which was causing her to do these things? I don't know. Other and more likely theories are that she actually just enjoyed the power and the ability to play with life and death. She enjoyed the drama around someone having a heart attack. It came to light that she had been having an affair for a long time with a policeman called Perrault, and that was in the hospital when she was working on her shifts. Now, in that hospital, I don't know, I've never heard of this happen before, but there's a fair chance, well, obviously it happens here, there's a fair chance it happens in other places, where every time there is a major incident in a hospital, police are called, and I think it's like a verification thing. They have to come and verify that actually this person has died in the manner that the hospital are saying that they have. So the policeman, who would mainly be called all the time whenever there was a heart attack situation, was actually the police officer that she was having an affair with. So some will theorise, not sure if I think that's totally right, some will theorise she was causing these heart attacks so that she knew he would come around. So he stood up in court actually and said that she had confessed a couple of murders to him during that time. So Kristen Gilbert, she will serve out her life sentence in a women's prison in Texas. And so that's the story of Kristen. Okay, that ends the Small Stories medical themed episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to get in touch, you can. Now, here is a little bit of a change from what I normally say. I've set up a Facebook group and it's called Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Who would have guessed? That's what it's called. If you want to search for it and join it and maybe speak to some fellow-minded listeners who share a passion for stories, that would be great. Yeah, I'd love you to do that. So I'm usually asking for people to, like the page or whatever, but no, here's an actual group that you can join. So that would be good. As always, there's Twitter. It's at Extra Stories Pod, Instagram, Facebook, Extraordinary Stories Podcast, and there's my email, which is extraordinarystoriespodcast@gmail.com. Okay, as always, thank you so much for listening. Okay, goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face. Let's get it on. Let's do it. Let's get it over. Let's get it on. Let's do it. Let's get it over.